I was talking to one of my mentors in the field the other day, and we got into the topic of polyvagal theory. And he gently encouraged me to look closer into some of the research as it currently stands behind polyvagal theory. In an effort to keep this channel as research informed as possible, I want to share what I found with you, especially because polyvagal theory and how our nervous systems work is something I talk a fair amount about in my series on stress and trauma. But what I found in my research is polyvagal theory currently mixes some really important and excellent neuroscience with some interpretive claims that just go beyond current evidence. So we'll break down some of the main claims that polyvagal theory makes that may be overstated and simplified, and try to paint a fuller, more nuanced picture of how our nervous systems really work. To begin, our nervous system is fluid. It is not made of fixed states. So polyvagal theory talks about three main states: the ventral vagal, where we feel calm and socially connected; the sympathetic state, often described as fight or flight; and dorsal vagal shutdown, where we freeze and immobilize. But scientists don't all agree that our nervous system actually divides into three distinct states like that. In most research, people describe patterns of parasympathetic and sympathetic activity rather than these fixed states. Because of that, we also can't think of ourselves as moving up or down these states like they're a fixed ladder. It is much more fluid than that, and different systems in our body can be active at the same time, which means parasympathetic and sympathetic activity can overlap. We can experience both simultaneously. For example, we might be hanging out with a friend and feel very relaxed and connected to them while feeling physically on edge in a new environment. So rather than switching between these three separate modes, our nervous system is constantly adjusting to our context in a much more fine-tuned way. And because the nervous system responses overlap and are constantly shifting, our behavior doesn't fall into one clear category either. You'll often hear in polyvagal theory that each state comes with this specific way of acting: calm and social in one state, frozen or shut down in another. But when different systems can be active at the same time, our behavior just doesn't map clearly onto one single state. We can also have the exact same behavior, like direct fixed eye contact, that is coming from a place of confidence and openness, or on the other hand, maybe coming from a place of hypervigilance and anxiety. So while there are certain body language cues we can look to that sometimes signal stress or relaxation, they aren't universal. It's very culturally dependent. And most of the time, our behavior is going to reflect a mix of activation and calm, just like our nervous system itself. Third point I want to make is heart rate variability can't tell us what state we're in. While heart rate variability, or HRV, gives us a rough sense of how easily our bodies can adjust to changing demands, like shifting between effort and rest, it is not a precise measure of safety, stress, or any specific emotional state. HRV changes for many reasons, even breathing, movement, our age, our overall health. So it's telling us a lot more about our overall adaptability and the flexibility of our nervous systems rather than how we feel in a given moment. Fourth point, because the nervous system isn't a simple ladder, we don't always start with active defense or fight or flight and then shut down if that doesn't work. Sometimes we're going to freeze immediately without even trying to fight or escape in the first place. Our nervous system tends to select the protective response that feels safest for us based on a lot of factors, like how much control we feel like we have, how much energy we have available, how close the threat feels, and what we've learned from past experiences. Social context and our past conditioning matter a lot because our bodies often rely on strategies that we've used to cope before. So when we're in that frozen state, coming out of it also doesn't just follow one path. There's no predictable direction of what deactivating looks like. Sometimes we may start more frozen and immobilized and move into feeling calmer and more grounded. Other times we may move from that frozen state into more fight or flight energy. So we're moving from passive to active defense. That doesn't mean our nervous systems have regulated. It just means we have more energy and mobility. That shift can be a positive sign that our capacity to act is returning, but it doesn't mean our nervous system has settled yet. Another point on the shutdown state. This state is not inherently more harmful for our bodies than fight or flight. We can't think of freezing and shutting down as more damaging to our body and our organs than fight or flight. Both shutdown and fight or flight are protective, adaptive responses. And both become stressful to our bodies if they last too long without us getting to recover and rest. So what affects our health more isn't whether we fight and flight or whether we freeze, it's how chronic and unsupported our stress becomes over time. Next point on neuroception, I'd encourage you to think of neuroception more as a helpful concept than a defined brain system. So polyvagal theory uses the word neuroception to describe how we subconsciously sense safety and danger. And it's true that our brains are constantly evaluating threat outside of us being aware of this. But this isn't coming from one specific biological system or piece of our anatomy. This process seems to involve a lot of different brain regions working together to interpret cues from our environment. Last point I want to make here is the evolutionary story that polyvagal theory presents is more complex than it sounds. Polyvagal theory sometimes describes mammals as having a uniquely social nervous system that reptiles don't have. But comparative biology shows that many non-mammal species display complex social behavior, and how our nervous systems have evolved is more gradual change over time than a sharp divide. Humans and mammals more broadly do have more complex brain networks. We have changes in how our vagus nerve interacts with facial expressions and vocal tones, and are more flexible in our social communication. But these features are more like refinements of older nervous systems rather than a completely new social nervous system. So, after unpacking some of these claims that may be overstated or simplified, I want to end with something equally important, which is giving polyvagal theory some credit for helping highlight several ideas that are strongly supported by research. One, our nervous system really does shape how we feel and behave. One of the biggest takeaways that is very strongly supported by science is that our nervous system influences how safe or threatened we feel, how we perceive and make sense of what's happening around us, and how we respond emotionally and socially. The vagus nerve also does really play an important role in regulating things like our heart rate, breathing, digestion, and our stress response. And when our nervous system is more activated or more relaxed, this deeply affects our mood, our attention, and our ability to connect with others. Second, feeling safe with others can be really deeply calming for our nervous systems. Research shows that safe social connection does help regulate stress. So those things like that warm facial expression, that gentle voice, steady eye contact, really can signal safety and help our bodies settle. And humans often do regulate better together than alone if we are around people that we feel emotionally safe and supported with. Third point, fight, flight, freeze, and shutdown are real protective responses. Our nervous system has multiple ways of protecting us. It is not just fight or flight. And there are times where we move into more passive defensive responses like freezing. But even if that shutdown response in the moment makes us feel immobilized and out of control of our own body, this is an adaptive and protective way of responding to threat, not a sign of weakness. The last point I want to make is just to acknowledge that the language of polyvagal theory has helped a lot of people. Even in the places where the biology gets simplified, polyvagal theory has given us a shared language to talk about our nervous system experiences. Many people find it validating and empowering to understand their reactions through this body-based lens, and to understand, again, that our initial reactions are automatic and unconscious. So bringing nervous system education into therapy especially has really supported meaningful change for a lot of people and helped people judge themselves and their reactions less and find more self-understanding and compassion for the very different ways that we respond to stress. So, after taking this deep dive together into the science behind polyvagal theory, I hope you can approach your body and what it's telling you with even more nuance and self-understanding. For me, this research has served as a helpful reminder that very often we're going to be feeling everything all at once. And even during mundane moments where there might not be much going on outside of us, in our internal worlds, our experience is complex and multi-layered. Because of that, we also don't have to reach or stay in some ideal, calm, zen state to support healing and move out of chronic stress. It is totally okay and very common for different sensations and emotions to exist in our bodies at the same time. And even when stress is present in our bodies, it's still helpful to bring in small things that ground and support us. Learning to be curious and open towards the complexity of our inner experience leads us beautifully into the next series I'll be sharing with you all on emotional maturity. So I'm excited to explore that more with you soon.